What is the truth?
Nothing matters. Feels nice, doesn't it? If nothing matters, then all the pain and guilt you feel for making nothing of your life goes away.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
I'm not a great optimist. When I was involuntarily living in a children's psychiatric hospital or at a residential treatment center for troubled teens because I just couldn't stop fantasizing about my own death, the last thing I wanted to hear was, "It gets better." When you're 15, 16, 17, you feel like you've seen so much life at that point. And if those few years, that decade and a half of memory max, is enough to tell you that you've had enough, you're good, you're ready to be done, then some sappy schmuck going on about how beautiful life is and how much is waiting for you if you just survive a little bit longer sometimes pushes you that much closer to the edge. It's like they're proving you right, that absolutely no one gets you or understands the pain you feel, and maybe you're correct that you don't belong on this planet. You're not correct, and you do belong on this planet, by the way. Even now, 9 years after my last hospitalization and very firmly not wanting to die anymore, I'm still not very good at seeing the bright side. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the age of 16, as teenagers tend to do, I had a few unfortunate traits. I had poor mental health, I didn't know how to talk about my feelings, and most regretful of all, I wanted to be a hipster. So badly. This was peak 2010s Tumblr days. Please don't judge me too harshly. While in my indie cinema phase, I encountered what instantly became my favorite movie. 1971's Harold and Maude is the most beautiful piece of cinema I have ever seen, and it's the ultimate existentialist text that's in no small part the foundation of my life philosophy. And while it couldn't save me from certain, drastic behaviors, this movie has been a constant through my darkest nights and brightest days. Before I get into it, Harold and Maude is a work of art that's best enjoyed without spoilers, which this video will contain. The movie also begs a massive trigger warning for self-harm and suicide. Please research it yourself if you're sensitive to those topics before watching the movie. DoesTheDogDie.com is excellent for this, but the site will also include some spoilers by necessity. I won't be talking about or showing anything graphic, so this video is a safe way to experience the movie if you don't think you can handle the cartoonish gore shown in some of the scenes. Now, with that out of the way, I'm so excited to introduce my favorite movie to you. The titular Harold is a lonely young man with mommy issues and a fascination with the macabre.
I can't believe this story you're telling me. It's macabre.
A wealthy NEET with exceptional skill at car modification and staged sleight-of-hand mutilations, Harold spends his days with a preoccupation with death and destruction.
Well, I think I should mention, Candy, Harold does have his little eccentric moments.
That's all right.
Must have been very funny.
Harold! Oh, yes, dear. Here is Harold now. Harold, this is Candy.
He's clearly in a desperate search for something to replace the love of his mother.
Tell me, Harold, how many of these suicides have you performed?
An accurate number would be difficult to gauge.
Well, just give me a rough estimate.
A rough estimate? I'd say 15.
15?
That's a rough estimate.
Were they all done for your mother's benefit?
No. I would not say benefit.
Harold doesn't seem to know what to do with his life, but what he does know is that the traditional options being mandated to him by his family, marriage, or joining the army, aren't what he wants. The other one, Maude, is the perfect foil to Harold, and she was everything my teenage self aspired to be if my moods woulda just let me. Maude is a 79-year-old woman who embodies the phrase free spirit. Her converted train car home is packed with art, organic hookah and herbal tea, a cabinet full of musical instruments, and a number of other relics of a life well lived. The two meet at a stranger's funeral, and after just a few days in Maude's world where together they liberate trees, somersault through meadows, and dodge the draft, Harold's heart has been opened up to love for Maude as well as for life.
Sure, I'm picking up on vices.
Vice, virtue. It's best not to be too moral. You cheat yourself out of too much life. Aim above morality. If you apply that to life, then you're bound to live it fully.
I haven't lived. I've died a few times. I decided then that I enjoyed being dead.
I understand. A lot of people enjoy being dead, but they're not dead, really. They're just backing away from life. Reach out, take a jump, get hurt even. Play as well as you can. Go, team, go! Give me an L, give me an I, give me a V, give me an E. L-I-V-E, live! Otherwise, you got nothing to talk about in the locker room.
Before the TikTokers try to cancel this movie for having an inappropriate age gap relationship, just chill for a second, please. One day, shortly after their meeting, after Harold shares his fascination with junkyards and demolition, and Maude her appreciation for plants and waxing philosophical,
I should like to change into a sunflower, most of all. They're so tall and simple. What flower would you like to be?
I don't know. One of these, maybe?
Why do you say that?
Because they're all alike.
Oh, but they're not. You see, Harold, I feel that much of the world's sorrow comes from people who are this, yet allow themselves to be treated as that.
the two spend the evening at Maude's home. Her characteristic joie de vivre is clouded as the depth of her past pain is revealed. She confides that as a little girl, she attended a garden party at the palace in Vienna, Austria. Doing some math, if we take into account that the movie was made in 1971, that would put Maude's birthday in 1891. This means that she lived to witness the relative peace of her homeland before 2 world wars put Austria right in the middle of it all.
That's just a relic. I found it when I was packing to come to America. It used to be my defense on picket lines and rallies and political meetings.
What were you fighting for?
Oh, big issues. Liberty, rights, justice. Kings died, kingdoms fell.
And she then mentions a man named Frederic. The memory of this man is the only time Maude shows any emotion other than her usual, almost naively joyful demeanor.
He was so serious. The doctor at the university and in the government. But that was all before.
So, you don't use the umbrella anymore? No more revolts?
Oh, yes. Oh, every day. But I don't need a defense anymore. I embrace. Still fighting for the big issues, but now in my small, individual way. Shall we have a song?
Very minor spoiler incoming, but it's truly essential for the viewing of the rest of this video, so if you want absolutely nothing pivotal spoiled about the movie, stop right now and go watch it. Later in the movie, after more time spent living life to the fullest for the first time, Harold reaches out to hold Maude's hand and notices on her left arm an age-faded yet distinct tattoo of numbers. the instantly recognizable mark of Auschwitz prisoners. In the course of 1 week, Harold and Maude go from strangers to friends to lovers. Remember I told you to chill. Spoiler of the ending of the movie coming up, skip to this timestamp if you don't want it spoiled. On the day of Maude's 80th birthday, Harold throws her an elaborate surprise party and intends to propose. However, Maude believes that 80 is the perfect age to die.
Did you know him? No. Me neither. I heard he's 80 years old. I'll be 80 next week. Good time to move on, don't you think?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, 75 is too early. But at 85, you're just marking time. You may as well look over the horizon.
Despite Harold's attempt to save her, nothing can be done.
Harold, don't upset yourself so.
I love you. I love you.
Oh, Harold, that is wonderful. Go and love some more.
The final gift of wisdom that she imparted to him seems to stick with Harold. Harold drives his Jaguar-turned-hearse off a cliff, and the camera pans up to Harold standing atop it. He then does a little jig, blissfully departing the scene while playing the banjo that Maude gave him. Some have interpreted this as his ghost, that he really did it for real this time so he can be at peace with Maude in the afterlife. Personally, I think this was his final fake suicide, and he intended to stay dead to everyone who knew him. No longer having to conform to his mother's, uncles, pastors, or therapists' rigid and conservative expectations, he's finally free to go and love some more. I've seen this movie, no exaggeration, at least 50 times. With every rewatch, even my most recent ones while writing this video, I gain a whole new meaning from the story. And cry. I do that every time too. When I was 16, I lacked historical knowledge and analytical skills, but even at the first watch, I recognized the significance of Maude's tattoo. I wish I could go back and watch it again for the first time, because that 1 second shot is the turning point of the movie when Maude's at first elusive character now makes complete sense. I initially thought that Frederic, the serious man in the government, was her partner who then later betrayed her to the Nazis and got her imprisoned. In the novelization that preceded the movie, however, he was her perfect match, and together they fled Europe and spent an adventurous life together. Whether that was before or after the war, I'm not sure. Maybe she's wistful because he didn't make it out. But either way, at this revelation, Maude's character instantly hops from 2 dimensions to 3. Now, with a peek into Maude's background, her every motivation becomes clearer. Her disregard for cops' self-aggrandizing authority.
Don't get officious. You're not yourself when you're officious. That is the curse of a government job.
Her self-appointed duty to be a not-so-gentle reminder of the impermanence of things by stealing people's cars and throwing gifts into the ocean. Her fondness for the innocence of plants and birds. Some of Maude's character, though, is still down to subtext, so answers to certain questions are left to interpretation. Did she decide to be positive later in life as a conscious choice to not be defined by her trauma? Did she make a vow that if she made it out of the war alive, she would never take her life for granted? Or was her radical attitude a means of survival during the worst of her experiences? More on that later. Well, it is with indignation that I must report to you that, with egregious gall on its part, art is subjective. So, one can only speculate. But I'll just go and watch the film another 50 times, and maybe by then I'll have something figured out. I'll let you know. The purpose of this video isn't to suddenly convince an overwhelmingly depressed and hopeless generation that we should all just be like Maude, because life is beautiful, and the tiny moments of joy and beauty that can be found, if you look for them, are worth the truly dismal quality of life that billions of people suffer to this day. Like I said earlier, the last thing I wanted to hear while suicidal was, "It gets better," or "Life has so much to offer." While Maude is so dear to my heart, simply saying, let's be like her, the end, is not the simple solution I wish it were. It took a lot more than just watching Harold and Maude 50 times to get to that place for me personally, but I did make it there, and your mileage will vary, but I'd like to tell you how I did it.
We all die. You either kill yourself or get killed.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do?
Listen, I was going to go on a tangent specifying the whole everything that's going on, but that's very unnecessary. Shit's fucked. You know it, I know it. We have no choice but to know it because a small handful of companies make a lot of money off of everyone knowing just the right amount of how awful this shit is, but not too much, because then we might actually do something to change it rather than just arguing with each other online. And in fact, people wanting to make money off of posting are incentivized more by rage bait and bad news than positivity. If you can believe it, capitalism is actually not working in the best interest of our collective mental health right now. The knowledge of the world fuckedness of it all is kind of a bummer, not gonna lie. Especially when, like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not good at being an optimist. I really wish I were, and I do try my best to be a little Maude-like ray of sunshine when I can. Navigating the polarity of either loving or hating life is a constant struggle for me. I'll watch a person play fetch with their dogs in a park and feel proud to be a member of the human race. I'll be in awe of the beauty the world is capable of as I track the transformation of clouds during a sunset, or as I admire the way light dapples the leaves in the trees on a sunny afternoon. But some days I'll notice how quick people on the road are to lay on their horns and swerve around each other, seemingly forgetting that if there's even just one thing we all have in common with each other in that moment, it's that we're simply human beings, trying to arrive where we need to be. Natural disasters and people sleeping on the streets, pets in pain, famine and abuse and genocide, forgotten lunches, and dropped gloves, never to be reunited with their owners, all of these have the power to bring me to tears. Yeah, ugh. My heart aches at the injustice and ugliness of it all, and I have to wonder, am I simply too sensitive for this world? Or is everyone else hurting this much but pushing through, pretending they're not, distracting themselves for the sake of our collective psyche? Here we are in unforeseen, dare I say it, unprecedented times. And, they're kind of doing a number on us. Trauma is a buzzword that some feel is being misappropriated lately. The American Psychological Association defines trauma as any disturbing experience that results in significant fear, helplessness, dissociation, confusion, or other disruptive feelings intense enough to have a long-lasting negative effect on a person's attitudes, behavior, and other aspects of functioning. Traumatic events include those caused by human behavior, for example, rape, war, industrial accidents, as well as by nature, for example, earthquakes. And they often challenge an individual's view of the world as a just, safe, and predictable place. With this in mind, it's clear that each generation endures their own unique traumas, whether we want to call them by that word or not. Things like mass disease, wars, terror, economic crashes, and environmental catastrophes can be traumatic, as in literally affecting the way our brains process information, our emotional regulation, and how our bodies function physiologically. Here in 2025, we've got all of those types of events happening at once, and it's nearly impossible to escape the visceral imagery broadcast everywhere you go. Depending on how directly crises affect a person, they can cause acute traumatic stress, some short-term symptoms, but not enough to warrant a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, and they typically resolve over time. Or they can cause full-on PTSD. With some level of separation from traumatic events, workers in, for example, healthcare, social work, humanitarian aid, and psychiatry can be susceptible to secondary traumatic stress while providing care to victims. Secondary traumatic stress is more likely to impact those in helping professions, but it can happen to anyone. With nearly 68% of the Earth's population using the internet and worldwide daily internet use in adults averaging 6 hours and 38 minutes, it's not too far of a leap to wonder whether all that time spent online is giving some of us enough exposure to cause secondary traumatic stress. But I've been vague. What does traumatic stress look like? The list is long, so I'm going to speed run it, and it's not exhaustive. Emotional. Common emotions in reaction to trauma can be anger, fear, sadness, and shame. The inability to regulate one's emotions can also happen through outbursts and mood swings. Emotional extremes can swing both ways, feeling either too much overwhelmed or too little numb emotion. That said, numbing is also common, and this can show up as having flat affect or no emotions. Physical. Issues with sleep, upset stomach, disorders of the gastrointestinal tract, cardiovascular, neurological, musculoskeletal, respiratory, and dermatological systems, bladder control issues, and addiction. Cognitive. Patterns of thought are definitely susceptible to being altered by trauma. For example, cognitive errors, like misinterpreting situations as dangerous when they're not, excessive or inappropriate guilt, idealization, or inaccurate rationalization or justification, hallucinations or delusions, intrusive thoughts or memories, that is, unwanted, persistent, and distressing thoughts or images that are difficult to push out of your mind. There's also the feeling of being different, alienation, shame. Lastly, again of this non-exhaustive list, is dissociation, depersonalization, and derealization, or, quote, the mental process that severs connections among a person's thoughts, memories, feelings, actions, and/or sense of identity. Simply put, kind of like being on autopilot and not being in the moment or even of the world. Behavioral. These reactions are often done to cope with their intense emotions or to self-medicate, as well as to feel a sense of control. These can look like self-harm and substance use. Social or interpersonal. Relationships can be tested when one or both parties are traumatized. People, quote, may avoid support either because they believe that no one will be understanding or trustworthy, or because they perceive their own needs as a burden to others. Survivors who have strong emotional or physical reactions, including outbursts during nightmares, may pull away further in fear of being unable to predict their own reactions or to protect their own safety and that of others. There can be shame of survivors' stress responses, which can even further push them away from their support network. There can also be feelings of betrayal and distrust of others. Well, if that all doesn't describe me. And maybe it describes you too. I don't want to be one of those internet self-diagnosers, but anthropologically and biologically speaking, our brains are just not equipped for this much information and bad news overload. I'm no doctor, but this much constant cortisol, the stress hormone, is probably not good. Never in history have we had this much access to traumatic information and imagery, so it would stand to reason that just maybe our nervous systems are kind of, to use a technical term, crashing out. A symptom of trauma I didn't mention was the perception of foreshortened future, characterized by apathy, hopelessness, and the inability to envision or plan for the future. Diagnoses of traumatic stress out the window, a lot of us, irrespective of generation, are feeling like that, and in doing so are a lot like Harold. Lost, alone, without purpose. Many may claim the title of nihilist.
Nihilism is the belief that life is meaningless and nothing is worth believing in except more nihilism. Existentialism is the same as that, but using longer words.
In 2022, the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once released. Spoilers incoming. Whether it was what people loved or hated about the film, it touched on the very contemporary theme of nihilism coming out in the freshly post-COVID lockdown world. Like this scene. Evelyn is trying to apologize to her daughter Joy, but Joy cuts her off. Oh, and also they're rocks.
I am unique, and I'm rocks.
The stupidity and humility that Evelyn feels is nothing new. Where before humans were so sure the universe revolved around us, with each new discovery we're learning that we're all small and stupid. Joy can see an infinite number of universes, in the majority of which life isn't possible. She's a small fish in a big pond.
You know why I actually built the bagel? It wasn't to destroy everything. It was to destroy myself. I wanted to see if I went in, could I finally escape? Like actually die.
Everything Everywhere All at Once was a hit, and I think it resonated with so many people, partly because Joy's journey represents the existential dread that many of us are feeling right now. However, while it does have blatantly nihilist themes, the message of the movie isn't, none of us matter, life is pointless, and we should all just give up. At the end, there's a catharsis, where the crushing doom of the knowledge of absolutely everything transforms into making peace with the vastness. By making that peace, Joy is liberated.
Here, all we get are a few specks of time where any of this actually makes any sense.
Then I will cherish these few specks of time.
Do you still want to do your party?
We can do whatever we want. Nothing matters.
The movie does a decent job at representing the differences in philosophies, I think. Nihilism and existentialism are two sides of the same coin in a way. The nihilist will believe that nothing matters and might consider it a hindrance, a reason to have no cares, passions, sentiments, or attachments because there's no point. Whether one lives or dies doesn't matter, because nothing does. The existentialist will think nothing matters and use it as permission to live life to the fullest and appreciate the broad spectrum of emotions. The circumstance of anyone's life is the result of pure random chance, so life then becomes all the more precious because of all the probability in the universe of any one thing happening, you managed to exist, and that's pretty cool. I will say that within nihilism, there's a bit of a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square thing going on. To squash a common misconception, to be nihilist is not necessarily to be a black-pilled, depressed loner who craps on everyone and everything and lives under a black cloud of negativity. It is simply to reject any inherent meaning to life. By the 1870s, nihilism had devolved into a movement akin to anarchy and terrorism, and it's had a modern resurgence with a similar spirit. But at its purest form, it is the belief in nothing.
Contemplating weighty, big-bummed life and death dilemmas in a godless universe opens the door to nihilism and existentialism, two of the hardest to spell concepts in philosophy.
So nihilism is the view that nothing, absolutely nothing, matters.
We've spent quite a large portion of recorded history thinking about what to make of things when life feels a little too much, how to hold on to hope, or whether hoping is even worth it. Many religions provide the why of life, but beginning around the scientific revolution in the 16th century and following into the Age of Enlightenment in the 17th century, religiosity in the global north began to decline. And with that came a crisis of hope or purpose. One of the most influential post-Enlightenment philosophers was Friedrich Nietzsche, who himself was raised in a very religious family. In his book, The Gay Science, there's an allegory of a madman exclaiming, "Where is God? I'll tell you. We have killed him. You and I. We are all his murderers." And the famous, "God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him." Much of his book grapples with the decline in religious faith, as in our question mark, where he says, "We have become hard-boiled, cold, and tough in the realization that the way of the world is not at all divine. Even by human standards, it is not rational, merciful, or just. In Believers and Their Need to Believe, Nietzsche derides believers in any faith when he says, "The extent to which one needs a faith in order to flourish, how much that is firm and that one does not want shaken because one clings to it, that is a measure of the degree of one's strength, or, to speak more clearly, one's weakness." And he doesn't only mean religion. He goes on, "Even the vehemence with which our cleverest contemporaries got lost in pitiful nooks and crevices such as patriotism, or in petty aesthetic creeds such as French naturalism, or in Petersburg-style nihilism, meaning faith in unbelief to the point of martyrdom, always indicates primarily the need for faith, a foothold, backbone, support. Faith is always most desired and most urgently needed where will is lacking, for will, as the affect of command, is the decisive mark of sovereignty and strength." As someone who dabbled in religion, I can definitely attest personally to how much easier life felt when I was spiritual. Having a rule book and idols to look to, and a promise that there was a greater meaning to suffering and life in general was a great comfort. And I'm not only talking about Christianity. To quote Karl Marx, "Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people." So it's no wonder that when people decide that they no longer accept religious prescriptions of their
raison d'être,
a vacuum of hope appears. That's not to say, however, that science and religion didn't and can't coexist. It's not an either-or thing. You are allowed to have your faith.
But first, let's take a sideways look at the suffocating inevitability of death.
Like I mentioned in the last chapter, a good chunk of us are traumatized, I think, either from personal experiences or simply for being too aware of the presence of the horrors going on, and quite possibly both. Studies are proving that life satisfaction and subjective well-being have declined in recent decades among young people, and suicide and depression rates are increasing. We're not okay. Trust me. It's easy to live within a bubble of relative safety, and one might believe that certain horrific events could never happen to you. But ever since the staggering number of deaths caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the genocides currently happening worldwide, and gun violence happening right on home turf in the United States, as well as any number of natural disasters claiming the lives of countless, mortality, especially death caused by outside forces, has perhaps entered the forefront of significantly more people's thoughts. With unstable mental health rates comes an opportunity for hope to erode, and even the will to continue living. Absurdist writer Albert Camus had many musings on suicide and its role in existentialism and absurdism. In his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, he says of suicide, "Dying voluntarily implies that you have recognized, even instinctively, the ridiculous character of that habit, the absence of any profound reason for living, the insane character of that daily agitation, and the uselessness of suffering. What then is that incalculable feeling that deprives the mind of the sleep necessary to life? A world that can be explained even with bad reasons is a familiar world. But, on the other hand, in a universe suddenly divested of illusions and lights, man feels an alien, a stranger. His exile is without remedy, since he is deprived of the memory of a lost home or the hope of a promised land. This divorce between man and his life, the actor and his setting, is properly the feeling of absurdity. All healthy men having thought of their own suicide, it can be seen, without further explanation, that there is a direct connection between this feeling and the longing for death. Disregarding how much mental illness plays into the decision to commit suicide, let's humor him that suicidal ideation can be attributed to existential malaise. Absurdists, nihilists, and existentialists are all operating on the rule that there is no reason, but good, satisfying lives are created only by imposing morals and values that we create for ourselves individually. Basically this, but unironically.
This is all there is, what you see around you. What is important for us is that we just enjoy ourselves every day we have. All this fretting about what happens when you leave Andy's room is an exercise in futility. Nobody owns us. We own ourselves. We're masters of our own fate. We control our own destiny. All this talk you hear that when we leave this room we will either end up at Sunnyside Daycare or Fireside Daycare, it's all baloney. This room is all there is, and the love we have for one another is all we really need.
In Camus' novel, The Stranger, a man named Meursault sits in prison and comes to terms with his death sentence. Well, so I'm going to die. Sooner than other people will, obviously, but everybody knows life isn't worth living. Deep down, I knew perfectly well that it doesn't much matter whether you die at 30 or at 70, since in either case, other men and women will naturally go on living, and for thousands of years. In fact, nothing could be clearer. Whether it was now or 20 years from now, I would still be the one dying. After a fit of rage, when the prison chaplain attempts, as many have been doing, to get Meursault to admit his sins and submit to Christ, Meursault, finally alone again and facing the dawn of his execution, becomes at peace. As if that blind rage had washed me clean, rid me of hope. For the first time in that night alive with signs and stars, I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world. Finding it so much like myself, so like a brother, really, I felt that I had been happy and that I was happy again. Mortality can be terrifying. It's a process to come to terms with. A lot of times, my over-analytical, introspective, and anxious nature hinders my mental health, which then makes it easier for self-destructive nihilism to creep in. So joy in Everything Everywhere All at Once, being a model nihilist turned existentialist, gave me vicarious satisfaction and hope. And it's unlocking that transformation that I think can pull a lot of us out of the overwhelming stupor and helplessness that the state of the world might have us stuck in. The key to that transformation for me came in no small part from the work of Dr. Viktor E. Frankl. While Maude is a fictitious Holocaust survivor, Dr. Frankl was a real survivor, and he devoted his life as a neurologist and psychiatrist before, during, and after his imprisonment in concentration camps to helping suicidal patients, especially those with existential frustration. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, is half a memoir of his time imprisoned and half an explanation of logotherapy, his own invention of a psychotherapeutic technique. And, greater than the sum of its parts, Man's Search for Meaning is a book ultimately about the human will for not just survival, but life, in spite of the seeming randomness of existence and inevitability of suffering. Frankl describes how everyday life in a concentration camp was reflected in the mind of the average prisoner through a series of vignettes. He divides prisoners' reactions to their new realities in stages. The first is shock, expressed sometimes through depression and hopelessness, and others like himself through grim humor. The second phase was apathy and emotional death. Naturally, prisoners felt longing for home and family and disgust at not only the physical filth of their environment, but also the metaphorical ugliness of what was going on. The men were surrounded by so much suffering, cruelty, torture, sickness, and death that within just a few weeks at camp, they had been desensitized to it all and no longer felt the need to look away or feel any emotion about it at all. Not only were many prisoners apathetic, but according to Frankl, their perception of time was skewed. He says, the Latin word finis has two meanings, the end or the finish, and a goal to reach. A man who could not see the end of his provisional existence was not able to aim at an ultimate goal in life. According to Frankl, the prisoner who had lost faith in the future, his future, was doomed. Without seeing any promise of release from their hell on earth, no guaranteed date or even a rough timeline to hold out for, their suffering felt pointless and infinite. Without that hope, for some it was deadly. He describes a man who had a vivid dream where an omnipotent voice told him that their camp would be liberated on March 30th. The date came and went with no freedom, and the man died the next day. I've heard of spouses dying shortly after the death of their loved one, and I once knew a family with a newborn whose great-grandmother passed almost immediately after meeting the baby, almost as if that was what she was holding on for. The story in the book reminded me of those people. Frankl ends the autobiographical half of the book quoting Nietzsche, as you remember, one of our leading existentialists of the 19th century. His phrase, "He who has a why to live can bear any how," is related to Dr. Frankl's experiences of fellow prisoners losing hope. He counseled many of his fellow prisoners and successfully bolstered their spirits, but for some, he just couldn't convince them of any why. Woe to him who saw no more sense in his life, no aim, no purpose, and therefore no point in carrying on. He was soon lost. The typical reply with which such a man rejected all encouraging arguments was, "I have nothing to expect from life anymore." What sort of answer can one give to that? To the hopeless modern person, this might sound about right. I know I've been there before, and it takes a good portion of my conscious energy not to slip back into it every time I read the news. To Dr. Frankl, what was really needed was a fundamental change in our attitude toward life. We had to learn ourselves, and furthermore, we had to teach the despairing men that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. We needed to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead to think of ourselves as those who were being questioned by life, daily and hourly. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. He continues, saying that these tasks, and therefore the meaning of life, differ from man to man and from moment to moment. Thus, it is impossible to define the meaning of life in a general way. The second part of Man's Search for Meaning details more of Frankl's existential philosophy, which he calls a sort of optimistic nihilism, as well as his experiences treating suicidal patients. In his opinion, depression whose root comes from existential frustration is not always pathological or a mental disease. He comments on how some doctors may be inclined to bury his patients' existential despair under a heap of tranquilizing drugs, a comment which I don't disagree with at all, and find especially funny that my therapist at the treatment center that was tranquilizing me hardcore was the one who put me onto this book in the first place. What I find fascinating is that for a book originally published in 1946, Frankl is already spot on about how the existential vacuum was growing wider in the 20th century, and it only got worse for the fact of two losses. The first at the very beginning of mankind as a species, when we strayed from reliance on animal instincts and began having to make choices. The second loss being much more recent, as traditions that had previously guided us fell by the wayside. Simply put, we are too smart and bored. Pessimist philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer's musing is mentioned that we are doomed to vacillate eternally between the two extremes of distress and boredom. In this instance, bored in the sense that we now have more leisure time than our ancestors with the advent of technologies that save considerable time and effort. Dr. Frankl makes the analogy that asking the meaning of life is like asking a chess master what the best chess move is. There is no such thing, generally speaking, because that answer will depend on the particularities of the stage of the game, current positions, and the opponent. The same holds for human existence, he says. One should not search for an abstract meaning of life. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life to carry out a concrete assignment which demands fulfillment. Thus, everyone's task is as unique as is his specific opportunity to implement it. The part of life that I think horrifies a lot of people and gets them stuck in an existential crisis is the finiteness of life, the finality of death. That we only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. Once time is gone, it's gone. And if that fact didn't horrify you before, does it now? You're welcome for the reminder. Sorry. In logotherapy, one works on coming to terms with that finiteness, and because of the finality, they must come to grips with the inherent responsibility to make what they will of their life and themselves, and determine to what or whom they are responsible, whether to society or their own morals and conscience. So basically, 1, memento mori, and that can be as scary or unscary as you want or need it to be. 2, now go and do something with your time while you still have it. To that effect, says Frankl, What is demanded of man is not, as some existential philosophers teach, to endure the meaninglessness of life, but rather to bear his incapacity to grasp its unconditional meaningfulness in rational terms. Logos, meaning, is deeper than logic. Basically, we don't have to be black-pilled, depressed nihilists dwelling in the meaninglessness. In fact, Frankl says that there is inherent danger in that kind of thinking, what he calls a neurotic fatalism. In terms of everything everywhere all at once, Jobu Tupaki was cursed with this neurotic fatalism, so much of a nihilist that she sought out destruction because none of it mattered anyway.
Sucked into a bagel.
The final section of Man's Search for Meaning, in a postscript written in 1984, is the case for a tragic optimism. Frankl argues that inherent to life is the tragic triad: pain, guilt, and death. The question that is posed of all of us is, how is it possible to say yes to life in spite of all of that? Or, can life retain its potential meaning in spite of its tragic aspects? In a nutshell, what is to be done with each of the triad is 1. Turn suffering into a human achievement and accomplishment. 2. Deriving from guilt the opportunity to change oneself for the better. And 3. Deriving from life's transitoriness and incentive to take responsible action. All of this is easier said than done, I know. And I've gone on for long enough, so I highly recommend you just read his book. It's quick and honestly potentially life-changing. I tried to do it justice, but it's worth the whole read for full context.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. The shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
So now we finally come to the title of this video. What is the point? Well, let's get into some conceptual semantics here. Straight answer, in my opinion, there is no point. Or, as Merriam-Webster puts it, an end or object to be achieved, a purpose. There is, however, again, in my opinion, meaning to be found if you look for it. That is, an aim, something meant or intended, and the implication of a hidden or special significance. There doesn't have to be a purpose for there to be a significance in life. If you reject religious scriptures like I do, simply put, there is no prescription and no point. You make your morality and you choose what you get to do with your life. Congratulations! Do you feel so free now? The galvanizing artiste of our generation said it best. Don't let no small frustration ever bring you down. No, 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 no. With a new attitude, everything can change. Make it how you want it to be. Stay mad? Why do that? Give yourself a break. Laugh about it and you'll see. Life's what you make it. So let's make it rock. Now, Ms. Montana is reductive and ignorant of intersectionality when she says, life is hard or it's a party, the choice is up to you. Or, things are looking up anytime you want, all you gotta do is realize that it's under your control. something I could never hold against her, but I do hold against my therapist in Utah, who absolutely insisted that the cure to all of my anxiety and depression and then undiagnosed ADHD and autism that were fueling those initial incorrect diagnoses was to simply decide that I wasn't going to be anxious or depressed anymore and would actually just be happy instead because I said so. He must have been a Hannah Montana fan too. It's because of intersectionality that I am not trying to come in here implying that the cure to the existential dread and depression that you might be feeling is to merely decide that you're done feeling that way. There are so many external factors that impact your life that are often stronger than a mere attitude adjustment and opposite action, no matter how committed and well-intentioned you may be. I would love to be proven wrong. I'm not saying it's totally impossible and you're doomed, but in my experience, we unfortunately live in a society. I was, unfortunately, a teenager with underlying issues and complex trauma that couldn't be cured by just reading the work of Dr. Frankl. In fact, it took about 5 years after the fact and a fresh reread of his book for it to really start sinking in the way I think Nate intended it to, and even then, another few extra years of medication and therapy for my PTSD for the suicide ideation to really start going away. The desire and ability to not just survive, but to thrive was very hard-earned, expensive, and exhausting, and could not have been achieved without the support network that I'm very lucky to have. I don't want to make this one of those, if I could do it, you can too things, because there was a lot of privilege that got me to the point of healing where making the switch from nihilism to existentialism was possible. Hopefully, that's not too dismaying of news to hear if you're looking for an easy answer for a reason to keep going. The answer, indeed, isn't easy, but if you'll allow me to be a bit optimistic, look at me go, I'm trying. There are some things you can do to at least make a step or two in the hopeful direction and regain some agency when the world makes us feel powerless. Earlier, I spoke of the research behind trauma, and in the text I referenced, it talks about resilient responses to trauma. The authors state, many people find healthy ways to cope with, respond to, and heal from trauma. Often, people automatically reevaluate their values and redefine what is important after a trauma. Such resilient responses include increased bonding with family and community, redefined or increased sense of purpose and meaning. Hey! That's what we've been talking about! Increased commitment to a personal mission, revised priorities, increased charitable giving and volunteerism. I don't want to act like Man's Search for Meaning is my own personal Bible or something, because it's not, but to bring up one last point, Dr. Frankl enumerates 3 avenues for finding your own meaning. The first is creating a work or doing a deed, leaving some kind of imprint. The second is experiencing love. Allow human connection. We're social creatures, however much the modern world might be making us feel more isolated. And the third is turning tragedy into triumph. Perhaps the most difficult, at least for me. Decades in therapy still haven't quite let me make that transformation. But at the very least, I can accept what happened to me and stop dwelling in regret, pain, and resentment. My own strategies for feeling like life is meaningful are not too far off from Dr. Frankl's. Social media. It's not impossible to avoid entirely, but most of us prefer to maintain some connection to friends, current events, and the latest memes. I do my best to try to honor the roots of what social media was invented for, but not the Facebook way. Connecting with real people, feeling like a part of a community, and sharing and appreciating beauty. I'm self-aware enough to admit that I do have an addiction to scrolling, so I've been treating it like an addiction. I think the YouTuber Struthless speaks to this way better than I ever could in his wonderful video, A Live Internet Theory. His whole channel is a breath of fresh air. I highly recommend it. Community. This is just an example, but donate to or use a food pantry, or get involved in mutual aid in some form. It's quite apparent that the US government is not here to help us. We are all we have. Food pantries are some of the most tangible reminders that good people exist. I've been weeping at recent videos of people in their communities mobilizing to create hubs for people to access the very basest of human necessities when the federal government halted SNAP benefits. Speaking from experience, accessing help from mutual aid can feel humiliating and shameful, but eating is better than not eating. And it's a nice reinforcement that actually there are people out there who care. Another very simple step to strengthening your sense of community is reaching out to someone you wish you were closer with. In the depths of depression, it's easy to believe you have no friends or loved ones, so that's why I specify to talk to someone you wish you were friends with. One of my closest friends and I are only where we are today because we were distant friends of friends and former coworkers, and one of us randomly decided to reach out a couple years later being like, "Hey, wanna catch up?" It's only weird if you make it weird, and the worst they can say is no. And believe me, I've been ghosted enough times when trying to reach out to know that, yes, it does suck, but when it works out, it makes the risk of rejection worth it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Shooters shoot. All of the sayings. We need other people. It's worth a try. I promise your people are out there if you haven't found them yet. Lastly, for this section is interact with other humans. Even if you don't even speak to them, first just get out of the house. Go for a walk, go to the library, ride the bus or train for a couple of stops, and then get off and go back the way you came. Or actually do something, go to an event, go grocery shopping. I don't care, it doesn't matter what it is. The point is to exit your cave of solitude and enter the real world, to remember that you are a part of something bigger. Create. Yeah, sometimes the whole, I am but a drop in the ocean, my art won't make a difference, that thing is crushing. Make something anyway. All of us will disappear. All of our works will turn to dust. But personally, I feel better having made something, however temporary either I or my works may be. One day, my YouTube videos will be viewed for a final time and then forgotten forever, the same way I had one last sleepover with my childhood best friend without knowing it would be the last time. But I don't regret a single second that was spent creating, even the stuff that will never be seen by human eyes. I'm not a good artist, but this is my reminder to myself that I need to keep making stuff anyway. Even if I immediately rip it up or delete the file, my soul, if I can believe in that, is more fulfilled for it. Pick your cause. We are multifaceted individuals, all of us, and if you're watching this, I have a hunch that you're intelligent and have a lot of empathy for other creatures. You probably care about too many causes to list. That's a great thing. We need more people like you. But it's a double-edged sword, and I know I can get paralyzed by caring so much about so many things, especially when, like I mentioned earlier, social media makes sure that we know about all the shit that's going wrong. It's sometimes referred to as compassion fatigue. I used to, I haven't quite kicked it, lean heavily towards fatalism, where if I can't do anything at all, then why even bother caring or hoping? Let's just give up because everything is fucked. Narrowing my scope is what helps. The federal government does not care about us. I can contact my representatives, sure, but that still doesn't feel like much to me. I vote in my local elections and even met one of my city council members, which was pretty cool, and that helps a bit more. Then I think about how frustrating it was to be so broke that I had to split grocery bills between 2 credit cards and some loose change, and later just stopped eating so much. And then the relief that came from getting a bit of food from a pantry, and I realized, okay, feeding hungry people in my city is a tangible thing that I personally care about and can feasibly help with. That's why I mentioned mutual aid earlier, just because that's what's near and dear to me. Maybe thinking about endangered animals gives you existential dread. What can you as one person do to stop our thinning ozone layer or the Amazon rainforest being torn down to serve cattle farming, and then the fact that those cattle will further thin the ozone with their methane and then be killed? Well, you can't do much, but not nothing. There are probably needy pets in a shelter in your city that would love to go for a walk or have their cages cleaned or could use a bag of food donated or have blankets sewn for them. Sure, it's not saving elephants halfway across the globe, but the animals closer to you would still appreciate the good that you're capable of. I personally can't do a whole lot to end poverty, but I can text my neighbor who has a newborn to see how she's doing because people need people and I can be a person for my neighbors. Ugh. Okay, I'm starting to sound white savior-y, I realize that, but what I'm getting at is that when you localize and be selective about what to care more about, not that you stop caring about other stuff, you can scale down to a point where you actually feel like a participant in life and that you're making some difference. And that's what any of us want, right?
Please, can we just stop fighting?
你说过，这是一个很残酷的世界，我们都在里面绕圈子，这我明白。你和我都在这个地球上活得这么久了。
I know you're all fighting because you're scared and confused. I'm confused too. All day. I don't know what the heck is going on. But somehow, it feels like it's all my fault.
我总是看到事情好的一面，那不是因为我天真，而是必要和需要。这也就是我的生存之道。
I don't know. The only thing I do know is that we have to be kind. Please, be kind. Especially when we don't know what's going on.
我理解到你不是一个服输的人，我又何尝不是？只是我们选择的处理方式不一样。
Something that perhaps isn't taken into account in the data about life satisfaction and mental wellness is misanthropy. Is it possible to think life is meaningful when it seems that so many people are seeking to destroy meaning and quality of life for large populations? I do believe that mine and every other human being's lives are worth living and should be given the opportunity to find their meaning. A topic I'd really love to explore is the anti-natalism movement, where so many people have given up on humanity that they believe having children is cruel. It's its own thing worth exploring, and I've strayed off a bit because I don't know how to wrap this up. I guess I'll just say that I haven't given up on people, I haven't given up on life, I haven't given up on my country. Sam said it best. There is some good in this world left fighting for. That's my meaning. I've been presented with this life, and good is what I'm going to do with it for as long as I've got it.